Hey everyone, hello you, welcome back. This is my series called Military Memetics Tutorial, Part 3. If you haven't seen Part 1 and 2 yet, Part 1 is kind of about the definition of a meme. Part 2 is kind of about how to measure a meme and life cycles of memes. And this next part is going to be starting with the potential military worth of memes. So, if you're new here, welcome. I just post whatever I want. This is a series. Wait, my cat needs to be let out. 1 second. Okay, we're back. I would say I usually say comment, and subscribe, but today I'm realizing it doesn't really matter. If you want to send me money, that matters more. My Venmo, my PayPal, and my Cash App, they're all the same. It's Spy Kids. So tip me if you'd like this, if you're learning, because I'm learning so far. Basically, I haven't read this document yet, so I'm just reading it for the first time on camera with you. It's about information and memes and how they can be measured and applied for the United States defense, DARPA. It's called defense something, and I forget already. But anyway, let's just keep reading. Enough chit chat. Okay, cool. Information operations, military culture, recruitment, training, deterrence, tactics, strategy, doctrine, peacekeeping and occupation, nation building, adversarial culture, military insurgents, terrorists, and civilians. Reduce probability of war or defeat, increase probability of peace or victory. These are, I guess, potential military worth of memetics. Memetics being the study of memes. Information operations, the integrated employment of the core capabilities of electronic warfare, computer network operations, psychological operations, military deception, and operations security. In concert with specified supporting and related capabilities to influence, disrupt, corrupt, or usurp adversarial human and automated decision making while protecting our own. Okay, and then let's look at this here, this gray part right here. Global information environment is the largest. So that's all information that exists. And then inside that, there's military information environment. And within the military information environment, there are 3 overlapping circles: information systems, operations, and relevant information and intelligence. Whatever that means. And then along the edge here between military information and global information is CNN, other governments, political decisions, industry, global information infrastructure, joint systems, defense information infrastructure, international organizations like the World Health Organization. Okay, interesting. That's just... Okay, let's keep going. Psychological operations, PSYOP. Purpose: to induce or reinforce foreign attitudes and behavior favorable to the originator's objectives. To convey selected information and indicators to foreign audiences to influence their emotions, motives, objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of foreign governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. Focuses on cognitive domain of the battle space and targets the mind of the adversary. Seeks to induce, influence, or reinforce the perceptions, attitudes, reasoning, and behavior of foreign leaders, groups, and organizations in a manner favorable to friendly national and military objectives. Exploits the psychological vulnerabilities of hostile forces to create fear, confusion, and paralysis, thus undermining their morale and fighting spirit. These are all things a PSYOP could aim to do. A psychological operation, its purpose is to induce or reinforce an attitude or behavior that's favorable towards your means, to the ends, your goals. And it's done in the cognitive domain. The battle space is the mind in a psychological operation. categories of military psychological operations. I guess here's 3 different types of PSYOPs. One is a strategical psychological operation, international information activities conducted by U.S. government agencies to influence foreign attitudes. These programs are conducted outside the military arena but can utilize Department of Defense assets. So they're within the military arena. And military PSYOP with potential strategic impact must be coordinated with national efforts. Okay, that seems like a typical PSYOP to me. Let's look at operational PSYOP. Conducted across the range of military operations, including during peacetime, in a defined operational area to promote the effectiveness of the Joint Force Commander's campaigns and strategies. Okay, and tactical PSYOP is conducted in the area assigned a tactical commander across the range of military operations to support the tactical mission against opposing forces. Alexa, define tactical. Computer. Define tactical. Computer, define tactical.
The adjective tactical is usually defined as of or relating to tactics, especially military or naval tactics. For more, ask me to give you more definitions for tactical.
Yeah, a computer, define tactic.
As a noun, tactic is usually defined as tactics, the art or science of disposing military or naval forces for battle and maneuvering them in battle. As an adjective, tactic is usually defined as of or relating to arrangement or order, tactical. For more, ask me to give you more definitions for tactic.
That's good enough for me. Let's move on. Potential military worth of Memetics, psychological operations, the spectrum of conflict. On one end we have peace, on the other end we have war, and between them is a spectrum of conflict. So on the side of peace, they put military, and on the side of war, they put weapons of mass destruction. Aren't those the same? Major theater war, humanitarian assistance, economic. What? These are crazy graphs to me. Command and control warfare. Okay, so it's showing that psychological operations moves in 2 directions, where command and control warfare only moves in 1 direction, left to right, right? You see that in the second one? Or is it... This is crazy. Let's keep going. Let's go back to like regular paragraphs. Okay, psychological operations, we said that. According to information, I don't know what information operations roadmap is, but according to it, PSYOP capabilities have deteriorated and remedial action is required. PSYOP is a low-density, high-demand asset, which is particularly valued in the war on terrorism. Well-documented PSYOP limitations include inability to rapidly generate and immediately disseminate sophisticated commercial quality products targeted against diverse audiences. That's okay. So that would be a limit. Like, a good PSYOP would rapidly generate and immediately disseminate sophisticated commercial quality products targeted against diverse audiences. Oh my god. Limited ability to disseminate PSYOP products and deny... Okay. Military deception, MILDEC, is actions executed to deliberately mislead adversary military decision makers as to friendly military capabilities, intentions, and operations, thereby causing the adversary to take specific actions or inactions that will contribute to the accomplishment of the friendly force's mission. The friendly force's mission. Military deception will not intentionally target or mislead the U.S. public, Congress, or the news media. Why did they say that? Military deception will not intentionally target or mislead the U.S. public, Congress, or the news media. Great. MILDEC, according to the roadmap, is military deception should be one of the 5 core capabilities of intellectual operations. Is that what IO means? Information operations? Fuck, I forget what IO means. The value of military deception ... is intuitive. Love. The value of military deception is intuitive. Effective military deception requires centralized planning, security, and close integration with operational planning. These are gorgeous images. I love this slide. Next. Counter-propaganda. Activities to identify and counter adversary propaganda and expose adversary attempts to influence friendly populations and military forces' situational understanding. Efforts to negate, neutralize, diminish the effects of, or gain an advantage from foreign psychological operations or propaganda efforts. Commanders at all levels should integrate activities designed to disseminate truthful information, mitigate adversary messages, and disrupt, degrade, and disable adversary psychological operations. It's like, okay, there might be people have counter psychological operations, duh. Potential military worth of Memetics. Public affairs operations, PA. Assesses the information environment in areas such as public opinion and to recognize political, social, and cultural shifts. A key component of informational flexible deterrent options. Build commanders' predictive awareness of the intentional public information environment and the means to use information to take offensive and preemptive defensive action. Lead activity in the first line of defense against adversary propaganda and disinformation. Must never be used to mislead the public, national leaders, or the media. Assess the information environment. Public affairs operations. They assess the information environment in areas like public opinion just to see, to kind of record shifts. And, wow. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, here's a box that says the information environment. And then 3 other boxes: physical dimension, informational dimension, and cognitive dimension. Physical dimension would be a place, right? A physical thing where the information environment overlaps with the physical world. Information systems and networks. Key characteristics: computers, communication systems, infrastructure. The physical dimension, that one's really easy to understand. It's the hardware. It's the computer. Informational dimension is where information is collected, processed, stored, disseminated, displayed. There's a dual nature. There's the information itself and the medium, and it links physical and cognitive dimensions. So this would be the dimension where like signs and symbols happen. That's not our minds, but also not necessarily the physical dimension. It's interesting. The physical dimension kind of emanates an informational dimension to our cognitive dimension, and that is where the human decision making takes place in dimensions of intangibles such as morals, public opinion, situational awareness. It's perception, emotion, awareness. It's the being, the cognitive us with our brains. I think that's really, really, this is I really like this because I do understand those dimensions as distinct and for the information environment. Those are 3 distinct dimensions. Information is, I don't know if you want to say found, but happening maybe. Information quality criteria: accuracy, relevance, timeliness, usability, completeness, brevity, and security. Accuracy: information that conveys the true situation. Relevance: information that applies to the mission, task, or situation. Timeliness: information that's available in time to make decisions. Usability: information that is common, easily understood, and easy to use, easy to get, maybe. Completeness: information that provides the decision maker with all the necessary data. There's no missing information. It's complete. That's quality. And brevity: information that has only the level of detail required. I think that is something I appreciate brevity and security. The information has been afforded adequate protection where required. And look at this guy with this. Look at this guy. Okay, let's keep going. Public affairs. According to Field Manual, public affair operations are combat multipliers by keeping soldiers informed, maintaining public support for the soldier in the fields, and mitigating the impact of misinformation and propaganda. Okay, I understand that. Military and adversarial culture, recruitment, motivation, enhanced image of military, service awareness, branding, national service perspective, global situational context, training, motivation, explanation, comprehension, retention, culture, traditions and customs, and mores. Social media, for example, smartphones, have provided highly effective and efficient means for propagating memes. Voice, texting, tweeting, for state and non-state actors, for strategic and tactical actors. Social media, e.g. smartphones, have provided highly effective and efficient means for propagating memes. Popular uprisings, like in the Middle East, demonstrated the efficacy of social media. Tools and techniques are being developed to, 1, rapidly detect, identify, and evaluate memes propagated by social media, and 2, to rapidly create and propagate counter memes. A framework for meme war is the Meme Control Center. Great. So now we're back to memes and social media and Meme Control Center. We just finished the military section. I know that part isn't as fun, I feel like, as like the memes, but important to understand what the military is. Let's reflect on it. It was kind of about like how information war is structured and thought about, and how it's useful to certain parts of the military, and how there are establishing that there are like adversaries who also use information tactics like psychological operations, and kind of just broke down a little bit about information science as it pertains to military operations specifically, I guess. And now we're back to memes, which is great. Okay, let's keep going. A framework for meme war is the Meme Control Center. Let's check out the Meme Control Center. A conceptual meme control center, MCC, consists of a meme processing center, MPC, and a counter meme processing center, CPC. The Meme Control Center, the Meme Processing Center, and the Counter Meme Processing Center. A Memetics for Intelligence and National Defense, MIND, Research and Development Center provides the tools and techniques employed by the Meme Processing Center and the Counter Meme Processing Center. The Meme Processing Center is highly automated with, for example, information mining and semantic processing. The Counter Meme Processor includes a multidisciplinary meme engineering staff, for example, cultural anthropologists, linguists, semanticists, psychologists, and social network analysts, OR analysts, intelligence and PSYOP analysts, and economists. Oh my gosh, so the Meme Processing Center is automated, and the Counter Meme Processing Center is staffed by social studies professionals. Okay. Culture, a set of values and shared by a group, and the attitudes and beliefs generated by values. So attitudes and beliefs can be generated by values, and the set of values shared by a group is a culture. Values, general criteria, standards, or guiding principles that people use to determine which types of behaviors, events, situations, and outcomes are desirable or undesirable. The basis for making a decision. Values are standards. Terminal value, a desired end state or outcome that people seek to achieve. Instrumental value is a desired mode of behavior. Norms, standards or styles of behavior that are considered acceptable or typical by a group of people. Some values are genetically determined, like nature. Other values are environmentally or culturally determined, like nurture. Terminal. Okay, that's fine. I understand. Get it. Norms, values, culture. Culture sets the standards of behavior required for continued acceptance and participation in the group. The group might be a nation, an ethnic group, a religion, corporation, or any institution or organization, any kind of group. Culture is based on common experiences and heritage. For example, food is often cultural. People tend to prefer the same daily fare they experienced as children. Another example would be religion is often cultural. People tend to prefer the same religion they experienced as children. Culture as nurture partially determines values. Values are the basis of decisions, and decisions lead to behaviors. Therefore, culture drives behavior. For example, preferences in food, religious practices, social interactions and transactions, manners, choices of self-actualization and lifestyles, marriage partner choices, etc. Culture develops like natural evolution with punctuated equilibrium. Long static periods of little or no change, punctuated by dynamic intervals of rapid or revolutionary change. Let's look at this thing that says the paradigm. Stories, symbols, power structures, organizational structures, control systems, rituals, and routines. Okay. So cultures develop like natural evolution, punctuated with equilibrium. Culture determines whether people will strive to better their condition or accept their lot as the will of God or fate. We must strive to better our condition while loving God. Culture determines in general how people work and play, whether they prefer cooperation or competition, individuality or conformity, how much they defer to authority, whether they prefer tradition or change, how much they value education, whether they prefer peace or war, whether they tend to be optimistic or pessimistic, whether they are sectarian or secular, whether they prefer critical thinking or magical thinking. Please have some of both. Please don't just choose a hard line between these guys ever. What and how they eat and drink, yeah. Culture is passed on from generation to generation by behavioral examples of family, friends, and other members of a group. This is something I think about all the time. Culture is also shaped, exemplified, and propagated by memes and narratives, which are a type of meme. Stories, oral, written, or multimedia, aphorisms, fables, legends, mythology, celebrated heroes and role models, iconic graphics, posters, prints, advertising, catchphrases, declarations, gossip songs, speeches, semiotics, signs and symbols. These are all the basis of memes. You know, meme is a unit of culture, right? Okay. Narratives can strongly shape or modify a culture. Cultural narratives and strategic narratives. Okay, then it's a new section, memes and narratives. So far we did the memes in the military, and then we did memes and culture, and now we'll do memes and narratives. Learn a little bit about narrative is good. So I think I'll probably end after this section, depending how long it is. Let's see. A narrative is a story, long or short, past, present, or future, with or without much detail, told for any purpose. A narrative is a story told for any purpose. A story has a beginning, middle, and, hopefully happy, ending. Cultural narratives are important in forming and maintaining cultures of nations or other groups, in giving a sense of identity and purpose to individuals within a culture. What is our past? Why are we here? What is our future? National strategic narratives describe the core interests of a nation and provide a foundation for statecraft and national security. Example, the U.S. post-World War II strategic narrative provided the basis for the global struggle against communism. A post-communism narrative is needed for the global struggle against asymmetric adversaries. Oh my god. People are fighting outside. There is not yet a suitable narrative theory or narrative engineering to counter adverse individual and social behavior originating from narratives. There's not yet a suitable narrative theory or narrative engineering to counter adverse individual and social behavior originating from narratives. Not yet an integrated system of tools and techniques for automating the ability to detect, identify, and evaluate narratives, and for creating and propagating counter narratives. Okay. Research shows that narratives are fundamental to the human mind and perception. Sensory data and subsequent perception are intermittent, with only the illusion and delusion of continuity and coherence. Plagued with uncertainty and flawed information, the subconscious mind creates an illusion of a coherent narrative, constructing relationships, motives, and intentions based on limited or incorrect information. The mind fills in details and revises its narratives as needed, with or without evidence, even retroactively. The mind fills in details and revises its narratives as needed, with or without evidence, even retroactively. The mind automatically, unconsciously, and continuously constructs narratives, weaving the weft of subjective reality among the warp of physical reality. Weft and warp. Subjective versus physical reality. Thus, individuals create personal stories about who they are and what the world is like, narratives by which they live their lives. These individual narratives can aggregate and evolve into cultural narratives, influencing the behavior of the tribe or nation. True. This is why we love pop stars. Okay. Back to this melting clock. The structure, function, and ontology of narratives are shaped by their building blocks, including metaphors, symbols, symbolic actions, semiotics, myths, frames, scenarios, etc. For example, metaphors shape and express cultural thought and style as embedded in language, artifacts, and behavior. They shape ideology and religion and can spark insurgencies. Metaphors? What's a metaphor? Like red as a rose? Or it's like when you say something is like something? Computer define metaphor.
Metaphor is usually defined as a figure of speech in which a term or phrase is applied to something to which it is not literally applicable in order to suggest a resemblance, as in a mighty fortress is our God. For more, ask me to give you more definitions for metaphor.
Okay. Metaphor is like kind of something that connects signs. The major sources of metaphor vary from culture to culture, whether the human body, animals, dwellings, landscapes, sport, war, etc. Many cultures have common metaphors, i.e. identical mapping of metaphor sources into target domains, but seemingly identical metaphors might have different implications in different cultures. For example, Arab Street has negative connotations, including instability, irrationality, and violence. Okay. But Arab Spring has positive connotations, the overthrow of tyrannical regimes. I don't understand that example. Okay. Culture and subcultures can be functional or dysfunctional or something in between. Culture anthropologists are loath to judge the functionality, the value, or worth of cultures. Anyone judging a culture is from within a culture and thus deemed biased. Such judgments are judged too subjective. If dysfunctional cultures and subcultures can be properly identified and evaluated, they can be enhanced. Memetics can be used to enhance dysfunctional cultures and subcultures. Maslow's hierarchy of human needs and wants can provide a reasonable basis for developing metrics to evaluate the degree to which a culture is dysfunctional. People love Maslow's hierarchy. They believe it. Maslow was immersed in American culture, so his hierarchy can be criticized for its composition and characterized of relative importance. The specified needs and wants are nevertheless generally valid, if not for every individual or culture, and the relative importance of some needs and wants can be shifted without invalidating the ability to identify dysfunctional cultures or subcultures. Great. So we're going to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs to don't use it like Bible. They said, but definitely use it loosely because you can look at these things to see if individuals in a culture or subculture is dysfunctional or not, I guess. It's just going through the different levels of needs from physiological, which is like shelter or water, safety, meaning like security, social, meaning like belonging and relationships, and then your esteem, which means like how you respect yourself and how you're respected by others, and then self-actualization, which means reaching your full potential in a group, basically. To the extent that a culture or subculture provides these needs and wants, it is functional or dysfunctional. So metrics can be developed and cultures can be evaluated. Dysfunctional cultures can be changed with memetics, apparently. Let's keep going. I'm into it. Memetics and true believers. I love this. The dynamics of mass movements and true believers have significant implications for memetics. In the 21st century, the true believer still infests the world in every nation and culture, whether of ideological, religious, social, or political orientation. If anything, the threat from the true believer seems greater now than it has been since World War II. Mass movements of all sorts, good and bad, have altered history over the centuries. They were particularly bloody in the 20th century, and they are with us to the present moment. Erich Hoffer, the longshoreman philosopher of the mid-20th century, expounded his views of this phenomena in his 1951 book, The True Believer, Thoughts on the Nature of Mass Movement. Wow, I'm curious about that book since there are a lot of mass movements going on. The following are excerpts from Hoffer that I have paraphrased or interpreted as aphorisms, occasionally injecting my own views, and which offer clues to the design of effective memes. Oh great, we're going to get some paraphrased sections from The True Believer. True believers are functionally identical. Regardless of the causes people die for, they die for basically the same thing. While all mass movements are taxonomically equivalent, not all mass movements are equally good or evil. We must know all we can about the nature and potentialities of the true believer. The true believer is everywhere on the march, shaping the world in his image by both converting and antagonizing. True believers arise primarily from the among frustrated. The frustrated predominate among the early adherents of all mass movements, and they join of their own accord without the need for proselytizing from the outside. Frustration alone can generate most of the peculiar characteristics of the true believer, including readiness to sacrifice his life for a holy cause. A proselytizing mass movement deliberately fosters in its adherents a frustrated state of mind, increasing the propensities of the frustrated. While those with a sense of fulfillment want to conserve the world as it is, the frustrated favor radical change. To the frustrated, the present is irredeemably spoiled, so that only hope provides comfort. That's interesting. There's a lot to be said about this. True believers are drawn primarily by hope, extravagant hope, even when not backed by actual power, is likely to generate a most reckless daring, for the hopeful can draw strength from the most ridiculous sources of power. A slogan, a word, a button. Yeah, true believers have an extravagant hope. That's nice. And they could draw strength from even the most ridiculous sources of power. That seems cool, but scary, I guess. There is a difference between immediate hope and distant hope. A rising mass movement preaches immediate hope that prompts people to act, but an established mass movement is preoccupied with preservation of the present, prizing obedience and patience over spontaneous action, and thus preaches distant hope as an opium to dull the impatience of masses and reconcile them with their lot in life. Wow. True believers are drawn primarily by hope. If a movement, let's say Al-Qaeda, wins a chunk of the world, it is not because they know how to stir up discontent or how to infect people with hatred, but because they know how to preach hope. One of the most potent attractions of a mass movement is its offering of a substitute for individual hope. The unemployed are more likely to follow the peddlers of hope than the handers out of relief. Those who would transform a nation or the world cannot do so by breeding and captaining discontent, or by demonstrating the reasonableness and desirability of the intended changes, or by coercing people into a new way of life. They must know how to kindle and fan extravagant hope. And it matters not whether it be hope of a heavenly kingdom, of heaven on earth, of plunder and untold riches, or fabulous achievement or world domination. Okay, these are the things people hope for. This is the examples. Okay, that's funny. Ugh. Great. Given the powerlessness, a sense of power as well. Give the powerless a sense of power as well as hope for the future. Those who plunge into movements of vast social change feel they possess some irresistible power, whether based on notions of reason and intelligence, like the French Revolution, or political ideology like Marxism, or religion like Christianity and Islam, or nationalistic mythology like Nazism. An effective doctrine, as well as being a source of power, must also claim to be a key to the book of the future. Faith in the future is even more important than the instruments of power for driving change. Faith in the future is even more important than the instruments of power for driving change. Instruments of power? What is that exactly? Give the powerless a sense of power as well as hope. To plunge into the undertaking of vast change, people must be intensely discontented, yet not destitute, and they must have the feeling that by possession of some potent doctrine, infallible leader, or some new technique, they have access to a source of irresistible power. They must also have an extravagant conception of the prospects and potentialities of the future, and must be wholly ignorant of the difficulties in their vast undertaking. Okay, wow. Take away our holy duties and our lives become puny and meaningless. In exchanging a self-centered for a selfless life, we gain enormously in self-esteem and the vanity of the selfless. Even those who practice utmost humility is boundless. The vanity of the selfless, even those who practice utmost humility is boundless. I kind of want to tweet that. I'm just gonna have to just post that to one of my accounts here. Okay, let's go back here. Okay. The true believer is willing to die for his belief. When individual interests and prospects do not seem worth living for, then one seeks worth and meaning in all forms of dedication, devotion, loyalty, and self-surrender. The embracing of a substitute will necessarily be passionate and extreme. The faith in nation, religion, race, or holy cause will be extravagant and uncompromising. We cannot be sure we have something worth living for unless we are ready to die for it. That's crazy too. I'm just going to tweet that too. No, I'm not going to tweet that one. I'm just going to ignore Twitter. The readiness to die is evidence to themselves and others that those who have taken a substitute for an irrevocably missed or spoiled first choice is indeed the best there ever was. All true believer mass movements are taxonomically equivalent. When people are ripe for a mass movement, they are usually ripe for any effective movement, not solely for one with a particular doctrine or program. The receptivity to all movements does not always cease even after the potential true believer has become the ardent convert of a specific movement. True believers could actually move between movements. They just love being the true believer. Each proselytizing mass movement seems to regard the zealous adherence to its antagonist as its own potential converts. Oh my God. Since all mass movements draw their adherents from the same types of humanity and appeal to the same types of mind, it follows that 1, all mass movements are competitive, and the gain of one in adherence is the loss of all others. 2, all mass movements are interchangeable and transformable, so that a religious movement may develop into a social revolution or a nationalistic movement. A social revolution may transform into militant nationalism or a religious movement, and nationalist movement may transform into a social revolution or religious movement. It's rare for a mass movement to be wholly of one character. It usually displays some facets of other types of movements, and sometimes it is 2 or 3 movements in one, such as religious, social, and nationalistic. The problem of stopping a mass movement is often a matter of substituting one movement for another. That's kind of what happened in New York City this summer. A religious revolution can be stopped by promoting a social or nationalistic movement. It is usually the newly poor, often from a ruined middle class, who ferment with frustration at the memory of relative affluence and who respond to every rising mass movement. The chronically unemployed feel degraded, disinherited, and injured by an unjust order of things and will to listen to instigators of mass movements. The poor on the borderline of starvation live purposeful lives, desperately struggling for survival. With every meal a triumph, they are immune to the appeal of a mass movement. Misery does not automatically generate discontent, nor is the intensity of discontent directly proportional to the degree of misery. Discontent is likely to be highest when misery is bearable, when conditions have so improved that an ideal state seems almost within reach. This part is so relevant to right now. Unless a person has the talent for achievement, freedom is an irksome burden. People join a mass movement to escape individual responsibility, to be free from freedom. The most fertile ground for a mass movement is a society with considerable freedom, but lacking in the palliatives? Computer, what is palliatives?
As an adjective, palliative is usually defined as serving to palliate. As a noun, palliative is usually defined as something that palliates.
Great, just something that palliates. Like, they want me to Google it. It means to reduce the violence of or to mitigate, to make less severe. Whatever. Even mass movements which rise in the name of freedom against an oppressive order do not realize individual liberty once they start rolling. Its chief preoccupation will be unity and self-sacrifice, which requires surrender of the individual's will, judgment, and advantage. Fanatics fear liberty more than they fear persecution. I don't know really what that means. Those who see their lives as spoiled and wasted crave equality and fraternity more than they do freedom. Where freedom is real, equality is the passion of the masses. Where equality is real, freedom is the passion of a small minority. That makes sense. Equality without freedom creates a more stable social pattern than freedom without equality. That makes sense too. Like, think of like Korea. A rising mass movement attracts and holds a following not by its doctrine and promises, but by the refuge it offers from the anxieties, barrenness, and meaninglessness of an individual existence. Where new creeds vie with one another for the allegiance of the populace, the one which comes with the most perfective collective framework wins. The fiercest fanatics are often selfish people who were forced, by innate shortcomings or external circumstances, to lose faith in their own selves. They separate the instrument of their selfishness and attach it to the service of some holy cause. I mean, it's not a bad thing. The inordinately selfish are likely to be the most persuasive champions of selflessness. I mean, that makes sense. In their earliest stages, mass movements are more likely to find sympathizers and support among the bored than among the exploited or oppressed. Fervent patriotism, as well as religious and revolutionary enthusiasm, often serves as a refuge from a guilty conscience. The technique of a proselytizing mass movement aims to evoke in the faithful the mood and frame of mind of a repentant criminal. That's like at church, you gotta confess. The technique of a mass movement aims to infect people with the malady and then offer the movement as a cure. The vigor of a mass movement stems from the propensity of its followers for united action and self-sacrifice. The success of a mass movement, usually ascribed to its faith, doctrine, propaganda, leadership, ruthlessness, etc., actually arises from its instruments of unification and its means used to inculcate a readiness for self-sacrifice. The angst of the frustrated stems from a consciousness of an irredeemably blemished self. Original sin. The desire to escape that self is manifested in a propensity for united action and self-sacrifice. Jesus died for us so we don't have to self-sacrifice. And then we're baptized to remove the blemishes, which is beautiful. The capacities for united action and self-sacrifice almost always go together. A group that is particularly contemptuous of death is usually close-knit and thoroughly unified. To ripen a person for self-sacrifice, he must be stripped of his individual identity, most drastically by complete assimilation of the individual into the collective body. The individual fully assimilated into the collective never feels alone. To be cast out from the group is the equivalent of being cut off from life. The collectivized individual is in a primitive state of being, equivalent to that in primitive tribes. Mass movements strive to approximate this primitive perfection. The capacity to resist coercion, torture, or annihilation stems partly from the individual's identification with a group. Individualists crush easily. Dying and killing seem easy when they are part of a ritual, ceremonial, dramatic performance, or game. There is a need for some kind of make-believe to face death unflinchingly. There's a need for some kind of make-believe to face death unflinchingly. Let's tweet that one too. Jeez. One of the main tasks of the leader of a mass movement is to mask the grim reality of dying and killing by evoking in his followers the illusion that they are participating in a grandiose spectacle, a solemn or lighthearted dramatic spectacle. Glory is largely a theatrical concept which requires a vivid awareness of an audience, and a definition of terrorism is the act of violence or the threat of violence against non-combatants to influence an audience. In the practice of mass movements, make-believe plays perhaps a more enduring role than any other factor. When faith and the power to persuade are gone, make-believe lingers on. Love that. I'm obsessed with the idea of make-believe, as using that as a phrase instead of fake or instead of pretend. Make-believe, make-believe. This is the inklings of a new song, I think, called Make Believe. That sounds so good. Wait, I'm getting it. Okay, let me write that. Sorry. I want to just get through this true believer section. Okay. Whew. Once the mass movement starts rolling, the present is shoved off the stage and its place taken by posterity. The battle line is drawn between things that are and have been and the things that are not yet. To lose one's life in a defiled, worthless present is not to lose much. The mass movement decries pleasures and comforts and extols the rigorous life, fashioning individual existence as dour, hard, repressive, and dull. Ordinary enjoyment is deemed trivial or discreditable, and the pursuit of individual happiness is immoral. The varying practicality of many of the goals which a mass movement sets itself is part of the campaign against the present. All that is practical, feasible, and possible is part of the present. Oh my God. All mass movements deprecate the present by depicting it as a mean preliminary to a glorious future, a mere doormat on the threshold of the millennium. To a religious movement, the present is a place of exile, a veil of tears leading to the heavenly kingdom. To a social revolution, it is a mean way station on the road to utopia. To a nationalist movement, it is an ignoble episode preceding the final triumph. Possessed of a vivid vision of past and future, the true believer sees himself as part of something that stretches endlessly backward and forward, something eternal. He can sacrifice his life because it is not the beginning and end of all things. Thank you, Jesus. The frustrated derive as much satisfaction, if not more, from the means a mass movement uses as from the ends it advocates. Chaos and destruction are at least as satisfying as that which will follow. People are less ready to die for what they have or are than what they wish to have or become. Self-sacrifice is an unreasonable act. So all mass movements strive to interpose a fact-proof screen between the faithful and the realities of the world by claiming that absolute truth is already embodied in their doctrine and there is neither truth nor certitude outside of it. Just because something is unreasonable doesn't there's no judgment to something unreasonable, right? It's just unreasonable. That's fine. Some things are reasonable and some things aren't, and the unreasonable things aren't worse or more stupid than the reasonable ones, right? It is the certitude of his infallible doctrine that renders the true believer impervious to the uncertainty, surprises, and unpleasant realities of the world around him. In order to be effective, a doctrine must not be understood, but rather has to be believed. We can be absolutely certain only about things we do not understand. Oh my God, that is so perfect. Why are there's so many good quotes in this section? I'm gonna tweet this one. The devout are always urged to seek the absolute truth with their hearts, not their minds. When a movement begins to rationalize its doctrine and make it intelligible, it is a sign that its dynamic span is over and that it is interested primarily in stability. If a doctrine is not unintelligible, it has to be vague. And if neither unintelligible nor vague, it has to be unverifiable. One has to get to heaven or the distant future to determine the truth of an effective doctrine. There is an illiterate air about the most literate true believer, using words as if he were ignorant of their true meaning, hence his taste for quibbling, hair-splitting, and scholastic tortuousness. The true believer is without wonder and hesitation. The true doctrine is the master key to all the world's problems. The fanatic is not a stickler to principle. He embraces a cause not primarily because it is just or holy, but because he has a desperate need to hold on to something. The fanatic can swing suddenly and wildly from one cause to another. Fanatics of all kinds are similar to one another at one end of the pole, despite seemingly at opposite ends of religious, social, or ideological poles. The radical or reactionary have more in common than either has with the liberal or conservative. Hatred is the most accessible and comprehensive of all unifying agents. Mass movements can rise and spread without belief in God, but never without a belief in the devil. Common hatred unites the most heterogeneous elements, even erstwhile enemies. Common hatred is what Joe Biden is going to win the presidency with. Isn't that just so bleak, super sad? Common hatred unites. Yep, okay. More true believers. True believers really should be a second video. Maybe I'll split this video. The genius of a great leader consists in concentrating all hatred on a single foe, making even adversaries far removed from one another seem to belong to a single category. The ideal devil is a foreigner. To qualify as a devil, a domestic enemy must be given a foreign ancestry. A sublime religion inevitably generates a strong feeling of guilt, and the feeling of guilt promotes hate and brazenness. The most sublime the faith, the more virulent the hatred it breeds. The influence of the fanatic is out of all proportion to his abilities. By converting and antagonizing, he shapes the world to his own image, such as causing democracies to become zealous, intolerant, or ruthless. Hatred is a convenient instrument for mobilizing a community for defense, but we often pay for it by losing all or many of the values we have sent out to defend. That seems true. Part of the attractiveness of the mass movement to its adherents is the emergence of a new freedom from the loss of individual judgment, the freedom to hate, bully, lie, torture, murder, and betray without shame or remorse. Hatred is not only a means of unification, but also its product. Imitation is an essential unifying agent. The one-mindedness prized by every mass movement is achieved as much by imitation as obedience. There is a connection between frustration and the readiness to imitate. The frustrated imitate to search for a new identity or camouflage their individual distinctness to be like others. The ready imitativeness of a unified following is both an advantage and a peril to a mass movement. While the faithful are easily led and molded, they are also particularly susceptible to outside influences. A unified group is easily seduced and corrupted. A unified group is easily seduced and corrupted. The preaching of all mass movements warns against copying foreign models. The imitation of outsiders is branded as treason and apostasy, which means collapsing in on yourself, I think. Contempt for the outside world is the most effective defense against disruptive imitation. Every device is used to cut off the faithful from interaction with unbelievers. We tend to exaggerate the effectiveness of persuasion as a means of inculcating opinion and shaping behavior. We falsely attribute to propaganda the startling successes of mass movements. Propaganda on its own cannot force its way into unwilling minds. Neither can it inculcate something new. The True Believers section is so long that I'm going to have to stop it here. 1 hour is my limit. I will continue reading in another video on another day. Thank you guys for, if you got this far. I'm sorry that I'm not editing these and making it funner to watch and listen to. It's just like one take, but it is what it is. You know, if you know, you know. So bye. Can't wait to the next section, which seems like is gonna be The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. That's funny. It's almost over, so the next video will be the last one. This True Believer section was really important. It could have been its own video, but I'm glad we also looked at memes and culture and then the potential military worth of memes too. It was a good video. All right, bye for real.